Hi guys, it's Mary McIntyre. Welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm going to make another silicone mould. It's only the second one that I've ever made. In the first one I made a huge mistake by putting blue tack in there. I will not be doing that this time. What I'm going to make a mould of is some of these glass cabochons. I'll just move the camera down. I've cleaned these with alcohol, so I won't touch them again until I put my gloves on. But I hand paint glass cabochons, and I've done some dragon eyes here on my channel. But for years now I hand paint glass cabochons, and they're beautiful, really beautiful, but they're very, very heavy, and any pendants that are made with them are incredibly heavy. I want to make a mould of these so that I can make some of my own epoxy resin cabochons and hopefully incorporate various different designs. I've got loads of ideas of things I want to try once I've done that. So like I did last time, I'm using a cookie cutter, and I found one that is actually the biggest in my set so that I could do as many cabochons as possible. And I've basically stuck down some sellotape, the like sticky side up, and put that down on top of it. The cabochons will stick to that sellotape, so that will hold them down. No blue tack will be involved, so hopefully I won't ruin the mould this time. I'm just waiting for my glue gun to heat up, and then I'll add that hot glue around the edge. Then I can put my gloves on and stick those cabochons down. The silicone that I'm using is from Start So World. I just got this on Amazon. It really wasn't that expensive. I still have like over half a bottle of each left. Looking at this and the depth of the cabochons, I'm probably not going to need much. I made way too much silicone last time, so I'm going to try to not do that this time. I'm going to work on the side of caution, and if I need to mix up more and pour it on top, I will do. It doesn't cure fast enough that there should be a problem with that. So these little measuring cups came with the silicone, so I'm looking at these thinking probably going to make up about 30 ml. It'd be 1 cup full of this. Might not be quite enough. They do a little bit extra, but last time I ended up with a hoofing great deep mould with 3 very shallow things in the top that can barely be used because I messed it up with the blue tack. Okay, so I think my glue gun's ready to go, so I'm going to get started with that. So the hot glue was just there to create a barrier between the cookie cutter and the sellotape, just to make sure that my silicone didn't seep out when I poured it. Once that was dry, I just placed my cabochons down flat side onto the sellotape, and I got as many in there as I could fit. So then I mixed my silicone. I just put 15 ml of part A, 15 ml of part B into my cup, stirred it for a solid 5 minutes, just to make sure that was thoroughly mixed together, and then I poured it in from as high up as I felt comfortable doing, and I didn't make enough. It's the exact opposite problem that I had last time I made a mould. So I mixed up another 20-25 mils of silicone, put that in. It just covered. I could have done with a little bit more, but it did cover. Then just left that to cure overnight. It's been 12 or 13 hours since I poured this. You can demold after 8, but I've been asleep, so hopefully this has worked. Okay. Minimal seepage on a couple of them. That's okay, I can trim that. So pop those out. Oh boy, that is thin. Ah. That's so thin on that larger one. I think it'll be alright on the smaller ones. I'm just worried that once resin goes in there, it's going to end up with a flat bottom because of how thin the amount of silicone is. Very much the opposite problem of the last mould that I made. Yeah, a little bit of seepage on that one. Apart from being a little bit on the skinny side, hopefully that has worked. It's nice and shiny on the inside. It looks like there's a tiny bit of debris got into one of these, which is actually, I can feel it on the mould, so that's going to leave a slight pit mark on the whatever gets cast in here, which is a shame. But I'm not going to be doing just clear resin with a pattern on it. You probably won't notice that. So good. I'm going to go and get my breakfast, and I will be back later to pour some designs into this.
Here's my adorable little mould. So I left that to air and fully dry, and then basically set about making some cabochons with it.
Okay, the mould has been drying all day, so it should be good to use now. So the technique I'm going to try is something I've never done before, and I saw it on Daniel Cooper's channel, which I will link in the description box below. And basically I'm going to pour some clear resin into these, not all the way to the top, but leaving a little bit of a gap. Then I'm going to drop some of my resin pigments. I'm still pretty new to resin. I don't know if alcohol inks and this stuff are the same thing. This is alcohol based resin dye. I don't know if that is the same as alcohol inks. I just don't know. So what I'm doing may not work. So what I'm going to do is just put a couple of drops of that directly into the resin, add some white on the back, and then leave it, and that should react if I've got the right stuff to do this technique. And I'm going to then leave it to sit. Hopefully, even though these are quite small, I'll be able to leave a little bit of negative space around them. And in about an hour, when the resin has thickened up quite a lot, I'm going to come in with my embossing tool. It's a rounded ended tool, so it won't scratch my mould, and then just swirl it, and hopefully that design will then set in the resin. I'm not going to make up a huge amount of resin, because if I don't do all of these, that's fine. But if I do have a little bit too much resin, because I still suck at guessing how much I need to make up, I've got my pendant mould here, so I can try that technique in something slightly bigger that isn't as domed. So yeah, I'm going to leave some negative space, then I'll have to decide whether I'm going to back them with clear, white or black. I don't know at this point. I'm just going to get through the first step of the technique first. So I am using, what's this brand? HXDZFX, which that's just a load of letters. So that's a set of resin pigments that I bought on Amazon. I'm using the J Diction 1:1 epoxy, which is a 24-hour demold. And I of course will be wearing my respirator nitrile gloves. I've already got my apron on, and I have my goggles ready to go as well. So yeah, I'm just gonna crack on and hope this works. So it's a brand new technique for me. It's only the second time I've ever made a silicone mold myself, so you know, it's going to be fun making my own cabochons and see how they turn out. So let's get started.
So I began by pouring resin into the mould so that it was almost full, but there was still a little bit of gap at the top. I then gave my pigments a really good shake and started to just drop one drop here and there of lots of different colours. Now, what I would do differently next time is to put significantly fewer drops of this in. This is super concentrated resin pigment, and the pigment changes the resin colour at the molecular level, so they don't behave in exactly the same way that alcohol inks do. I love the result, I really do. I love the final result, but next time I just would not put this much in. It gave me a real headache. I went back in and made the swirl, but I hadn't left the resin long enough. You can see that it's very, very fluid here. So I actually lost some of that swirl and had to go back in and do it again about 40 minutes later. So definitely leave the resin a full hour before you swirl it if you try this.
It's been just over 12 hours since I poured these. The resin that I had left over and poured elsewhere has cured fine. Unfortunately, the backs of these are still wet, and if I push my tool in, I can feel that the resin underneath is kind of set. So I don't know whether this will set over time or whether these pigments used neat like this are going to stop this back layer from setting properly. I'm just going to have to leave it and hope for the best. Oh. I think the stuff underneath has cured, so if I do need to scrape some of this gloop off the back, maybe I'll still have something salvageable. So, aeroplane going over. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if this is going to be an epic fail. I'll just leave them. That's all I can do. It's a shame because they're looking really pretty, even though the swirls have kind of disappeared on the back. But fingers crossed, I'll just be patient and leave them be for a while. Okay, they are setting. They're taking their time. The edges are still wet, but the middles are now dry, so I think it's just the alcohol content of the pigment has made it slower to cure the resin. So yeah, I'm not going to put a back coat on these until tomorrow, just to be absolutely certain that those edges are cured before I put more resin on top, because I don't want to demold and find the middle still gummy. But the centre of these, when I touch it with my tool, is now pretty solid. I'm not pushing on hard, obviously. But yeah, they are curing, so that's a relief. I have also looked online what the difference between resin, pigment and alcohol inks is. It seems like they can be used interchangeably. If you do so, do it with caution, because if you put this much on the top, they're not going to cure very quickly. Oh, I really hope that some of the design has been preserved, because there's so much pigment in these that I think they may be very muddy, but we'll have to wait and see. Okay, it's taken 36 hours, but they have now finally cured. I can tap them, no stickiness, tiny bit tacky, but I think that's just down to the quantity of pigment that was on the surface. So they're dry to touch, so I'm going to risk backfilling them. I'm just going to coat them with clear. My rationale for using clear is that if there is any kind of unbonded pigment on the back of these, if there's clear resin for that to seep into, then it can. If I put more colourant into the stuff I'm backing them with, and it just again pushes them over a limit where the resin doesn't want to cure properly. So I've obviously got the window open in here to air it, and every time I try to film there's just a noisy lorry goes past. Yeah, so basically I'm going to leave it clear, so if there is any pigment on the back here that isn't fully bonded, then it's got something clear to seep into without any additional colourants or pigment me mixing in that may stop it from kind of bonding properly or curing properly. So I don't need to mix up much resin at all. I've got a pipette handy, and the other thing when I backfill these, normally I try to get them as level as possible, but I really don't want the backs to be domed, because if I do decide to stick these in a bezel tray, if the back is kind of domed upwards, they're not going to sit flat. Equally, I don't want them so that they shrink and have that kind of concave effect, so I'm going to have to just carefully try to judge how much resin I'm putting in there, and just making sure that they're neither too dished nor too domed. So when I mean dished, I mean like I've got a pendant here that I used some leftover resin. You can clearly see that the sides here have crept right up the sides of the mould. And if I stick that in a bezel, it isn't going to stick down because only the sides are going to catch it. Equally, if that was fully domed over, it wouldn't stick down either. So I need to just try to get that amount of resin correct. So I'm going to put my PPE on and mix up some resin, then I'll be back to just put a tiny amount of resin into those and hopefully get a nice result. Finally, the moment of truth. This has been a long, drawn-out process. Oh my god, it's been days of messing about. Anyway, let's get on with these cabochons. Okay. Some interesting effects on that. Some weird speckles on the surface, but they're embedded within the resin. Very interesting. But you can still see the spiral. It's kind of fragmented. It's a really interesting effect. So that's those two. I think there's going to be a bit of clean up on the edges of some of these. It's really interesting that these dyes have not behaved in the same way that alcohol inks would have behaved, that's for certain. But they are giving me some interesting effects. I'll bring you down properly in a second, but they're kind of, yeah, I don't know how I feel about those. Quite like that one, even though it's really dark. I have a feeling they're all going to be quite dark compared to what I had in my brain. It's very, very interesting. It's fair to say you cannot do this technique with these resin colorants. It's definitely giving me some funky effects though. They are all unique, which is good. Oh, I like that one. It's just these weird bits where some of the white has balled up and sunk down. It just looks like the top has got scratches on it or something. The actual effect though is kind of pretty. Let me bring you down to see these up close. Okay, so I've used a nail file to clean up the edges where there was any overspill. When I first demolded these, I was kind of upset about the white dots. This is where some of the white pigment has just fallen all the way through and is on the inside of the clear resin that is forming the top of these now. Now I've looked at them a bit longer, I actually love those white dots. They look like stars, and even though I wasn't intending for these to look spacey, I think they've got like a kind of spacey nebula feel about them. They're so pretty. If you look up close, I've just sat a couple of them on some bezels that I have that are the right size. The detail, the swirling detail in these is just mesmerizing, and the longer I look at them, the more I love them. Like, there's so much dimension because the pigments have slowly fallen through that resin, and it's really hard to even show on camera what my eye is seeing. Obviously, being a domed shiny thing, you've got my my daylight lamp showing through there, but they're so pretty. They don't look remotely like I intended them to. Does resin ever? It never does for me, but I really like the result. So if I did this again, and I probably will, I will use significantly less of the pigment. You can't use this stuff exactly the same way that you would use alcohol inks, but the effect is very, very similar. Even this dark one here in the middle, like that's so deep space or deep sea, it's just gorgeous. So yeah, considering I've only ever made a silicone mould once before, this is only my second time, it's done a really good job. I'm so happy with them. So yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do with them next, and I don't have any bezels that are the right size for the ones that aren't sitting in one, but they're just beautiful. They're so beautiful. So I'm really happy with how these turned out. So thanks for watching if you're still here. I hope you enjoyed the video, and take care. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.